Hi everyone and welcome back. Look, there's a lot of chatter going around about super right now, about retirement savings. You've probably seen it, you've heard it. People talking about changes, resets, pressure on the system, pooling. And the reality is, over the next few years, millions of Australians are going to move into retirement. We've got a big bottleneck of boomers lining up. And that's going to put real pressure on the super system. And the reason for that is really quite simple. You've got an entire generation all reaching retirement age at the same time. This is like a massive wave. All these people born in a very similar window, moving through life together, and now they're all hitting retirement age all together, which means instead of a steady flow of people retiring like what we've had, you've now got a surge, or we're moving into a surge, which is like a concentration or a bottleneck. And behind these boomers, you don't have the same volume of people contributing at the same rate. See, the CEO of Australian Super has even openly spoken about this. Ideas are starting to be thrown around. The ABC, the media. It's obviously a serious issue. So naturally, that's starting to actually make people a little bit nervous, particularly those getting very close to that retirement age and getting close to accessing their super. Because when you start hearing words like change or restructure or reset, well, that's naturally going to cause possibly some trust issues. So we ask, what does this mean for me? Is my money actually safe? Are they going to change the rules on me? Now, if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I do a lot of videos on government powers. I explain how the system itself works. And look, according to the Banking Act of 1959 and the Crisis Amendment Bill, the government can actually legally take your super off you, take your savings off you. But that's in times of crisis. They certainly can do that. As to whether they will or not is not something that I'm going to discuss in this video. Yes, those powers do exist legally, but that's not what we're talking about here. I don't believe that's what we need to be concerned about at the moment. That's crisis level stuff. But what's happening with super right now, as of today, the real issue at this moment is actually quite different to that. It's much slower, it's structural, and it's already starting, it's already beginning. And when people don't actually understand what's really going on, it can create some confusion, and then we start getting conspiracy, and that creates fear. So I'm going to try to strip that all back and actually look at what's really happening with superannuation. So let's start with the actual issue itself, because it's not what most people assume. The problem isn't that there's just not enough money. Australia's got one of the largest superannuation pools in the world. Currently, it's sitting over $4.2 trillion, I believe it is. So that in itself is not really the issue. The issue is what's about to happen next, how this wave of retirees is going to affect it. See, for the last 20 or 30 years, people have been working, they've been contributing, and they've been building up their super, building up the pool. Money's been flowing into the system. Something like $3 to $4 billion a week gets poured into super. Now, look, my personal opinion, the entire thing's a bit of a mess, but that's another story. But now all of this flips. We've got millions of Australians who are literally about to retire. And instead of all of this money pouring in from them, it's going to have to start coming out. And that's going to change everything. Because the system was built for growth. It was built for accumulation, for long-term investing. It wasn't really built for millions of people all drawing income out at the same time for the next 20 or 30 years. So this is a real pressure point. Not the size of the system. Again, it's got nothing to do with the size, but it's the direction of the flow. Think of it like a dam. For years, water's been accumulating in the dam, flowing in, building up. The levels are getting higher, and then suddenly the gates begin opening. There's more water going out than there is water coming in. You don't have a problem immediately, but you've got a system that starts to become under pressure. And this isn't some abstract thing. This is people's real retirements. People who are about to actually stop working, have been working all of their lives, and they rely on that money, or they will rely on that money for the next 20 or 30 years. So when you hear talk about changes, when you hear the word restructuring or reset, well, it's obviously not coming out of nowhere. It is coming from this actual real shift that's there, from accumulation moving to distribution. And most people haven't ever actually realised that this shift was going to happen, and now it is happening. And this is where obviously things start to get a little bit distorted. People hear these words, reset, and straight away they think, oh goodness, collapse. They think maybe something's broken or something's about to be taken from them. And I don't believe that that's what this actually is. This isn't any kind of collapse. This is just an adjustment. It's happened before. This is a system trying to adapt to a change it hasn't really faced before in the entire history. Because now you've got more people retiring. We've got people that are living longer, and they're relying on that money for decades. While at the same time, you don't have the same level of money flowing in behind them. And that is obviously going to create some pressure. Not necessarily panic. It doesn't have to be panic, but it is pressure. And here's the part that doesn't really get talked about enough, I don't believe. A lot of people don't actually have enough super in their super savings accounts anyway. So you've got this situation where the system is huge overall, $4.2 trillion, but individual outcomes, some of them are still quite uncertain. And that's a problem that governments can't really ignore. They have to look at it. It doesn't necessarily mean how do they take it off you, but how do we, as the government or as the system, make sure that people don't run out? Because if large numbers of people do actually run out of their super and their accounts dry up, well, the pressure isn't just going to disappear. The pressure is going to shift back onto the government again through the pension system, that kind of thing. So again, when you hear these words, reset, reform, restructure, what they're really talking about is, from a system perspective, how do they make this system last without blowing it all up? Not necessarily how do we blow it up and end it. And this is where things really start to get misunderstood, because you've probably heard people say things, and I've had people send me things that suggest that the government's going to pool the super. And when people hear that, it sounds like your money's about to get taken and maybe just thrown into one big pool so that everyone can share from it. But that's not what's happening. There's no evidence that suggests that that's happening. And in any case, your super is already pooled. It's not sitting there in its own private little bank account with your name on it waiting for you to retire. It's invested. It's invested in property. It's invested in infrastructure, in the stock markets, alongside everyone else's money. So your super keeps the big corporations in business. It keeps BlackRock going. Larry Fink, it keeps him happy. That's what it does. It's not tucked away in some savings account. It's actually propping up industry all around the world. That's how the system's been designed. So when you listen to these professors and these experts talk about pooling now, they're not talking about your balance as such being taken. They're talking about something else. They're talking about pooling the risk, specifically, right? The risk of how long you're going to live after you retire, because that's going to be a variable. Here's the reality. Some people retire and then they're going to live for 5 or 10 years afterwards. Some people are going to retire and live for 30 years afterwards. Some people will run out of money early. Some are going to pass away with heaps of it left over. And the system doesn't handle that perfectly. So the thinking, from what I can understand, is instead of everyone managing their own pot, as we would expect, they're going to start thinking about introducing structures that spread the risk across groups, like income streams, lifetime pensions, annuity style products, where the focus isn't just on how much you've got in your balance, but how long it actually lasts. And this is obviously quite naturally where people begin to get uncomfortable, because it starts to feel like you're losing control. You've got no more control. You've got less flexibility. You've got less ability to just take your money out and do with it what you want. And I think that that's a perfectly fair concern, because now you've got two things. You, who wants to control your own money, and the system, who wants to keep stability. And obviously those two things don't necessarily perfectly align. So with regards to pooling, when you hear that word, don't jump straight into the fact that they're taking my money. Understand what's actually being discussed. It's not about taking your super. It's about controlling how you use it and how it's actually going to be paid to you however long. So this is where it all starts to come together, because once you actually begin to understand the pressure and you understand the pooling discussion, you start to see what's really happening here. And it's this: we're moving away from the old system that basically says, look, here's your super, take it, do with it what you want, buy a house, buy a car, buy a boat, to a system now that looks more like, okay, here's your super, and here's how we think that you should use it. Maybe with some more structure around it, some more guidance, more focus on maybe income rather than just ripping the whole lot out in a lump sum. Because from the system's point of view, a lump sum is unpredictable. People might spend it too fast, invest it poorly, or just run out. But if they can push you into an income stream, well, it's predictable, it's controlled, it's managed, and it's easier for them to sustain over time. So the shift isn't about necessarily jumping in and taking your money. It's about shaping how that money is going to basically flow back to you. And again, this is obviously and fairly where the tension comes in, because if you're one of those people, from your perspective, you want flexibility, you want access, you want control. It's your money. That's how you see it. But from the system's perspective, the system is not necessarily interested. It wants stability, predictability, sustainability. And those two things just don't line up. So you might start to see a little bit more nudging, maybe, toward income products, less emphasis on taking everything out at once, and more structure around retirement planning. And again, I don't believe that's because they're trying to take it, because they're trying to manage what happens after all of these people stop working all at once. And when your contributions stop and your withdrawals begin, you start taking it out. This is obviously the part that most people miss. It's not a sudden change, it's gradual. It happens over time through small adjustments, through policy shifts, through product changes, not just one big event or one big announcement. So if you're sitting there waiting in worry for a moment where everything just changes overnight, you're probably going to miss it, because it doesn't happen like that historically. It happens slowly. And while it's happening, most people don't actually even realise it. until it's already happened. So if we could just try to bring it back to reality, because this is obviously where a lot of people get carried away. Right now, there's no evidence. There is zero evidence that your super is going to be taken. There's no evidence that you're going to have a forced pooling of our balances or the government stepping in and just grabbing people's money. That's not what's happening. But there is obviously movement in this space. There's chatter, there's talk in this space. Ideas are being thrown around. And this is what you should actually be paying attention to. Things like changes to the tax settings, more structured retirement products, stronger encouragement toward income streams, and more influence over how super is used over time. Not control in the sense of taking it. Not yet anyway, but control in the sense of shaping it. Because from a system perspective, when you've got trillions of dollars, in this case $4.2 trillion just sitting there, and millions of people about to dip into a big chunk of it, doing nothing is probably something that isn't really an option. So again, it shouldn't be about panic, but it's also not something to ignore. It's something to understand, because the more you understand how the system is evolving, the better decisions you can make within it. And this is where it gets bigger than just super, because this isn't about retirement accounts necessarily. It's about how people think about money itself. Most people tie their entire sense of security to a system, whether it be to their job, to their income, to their superannuation. These are all external things. And don't get me wrong, those things matter. Of course they do. Everybody needs money. Everybody needs somewhere to live, to have a roof over their head. We need stability. But if your entire sense of security is built on these things, then any change, which is obviously very possible, can feel like a threat. And this is where it gets bigger than just super, because this isn't about retirement accounts necessarily. It's about how people think about money itself. Most people tie their entire sense of security to a system, whether it be to their job, to their income, to their superannuation. These are all external things. And don't get me wrong, those things matter. Of course they do. Everybody needs money. Everybody needs somewhere to live, to have a roof over their head. We need stability. But if your entire sense of security is built on these things, then any change, which is obviously very possible, can feel like a threat. And that's why conversations like this, if they're done the wrong way, they can create a lot of fear. And again, it's not because something's actually being taken here, it's because people feel that they're losing control. And control is something that most people don't actually have as much of as they would like. Because whether it's super, whether it's the economy, or anything else, systems and this system that we live in can change. Policies can change. Governments can change. Environments can change. And if you're completely dependent on that, well, then every change is going to impact you a lot more, and it's going to feel like a threat. So, no, I don't believe that there's any risk that they're coming to take your super, but the system is evolving, and the real question isn't what are they actually doing here or what are they going to do. It's how dependent are you on it working exactly the way that it does today. Because real security isn't just in this system that we can see. It's in how you position yourself around it. Look, and if you're someone who's genuinely starting to think about how you position yourself outside of these systems, because that is actually a very real option today, it's becoming that way. And I get asked a lot about Bitcoin and how it works and how to buy it safely. And look, I'm not a financial advisor, but I do work with a group called Stormrake. They're based here in Australia, and they actively help a lot of people move into Bitcoin properly without all of the noise and the fuss. If you are interested in that and you want to check them out, I do know them personally. I'll put a link in the description below. Feel free to check it out. I hope this video has at least informed you and brought you up to date as to where things are with the super world at the moment. Make sure you like and subscribe. It really does help with the algorithms. Throw a comment down in the box. Let me know what you think. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.